Hello, I have perfected Homebody on Steam by collecting all 10 achievements. This includes escaping the house, getting a high score in Purd Mystery, turning on all generators, and a few more we'll touch on a bit later. Welcome to my full review. Homebody is a survival horror puzzle game developed by Game Grumps and published by Rogue Games. You can find the game on Steam, Epic, and all major game consoles. Starting the game off with the settings, it is simple and straight to the point. You can choose your language, controls, and gamma if you so choose. You'll notice very few options. That's because the game doesn't need them with its nostalgic aesthetics. It should run perfectly on almost anything. The game feels great on base controls, especially for controllers. However, playing on mouse and keyboard can be frustrating at times. The game is focused around third-person, claustrophobic, somewhat fixed camera angles. Think of classical PlayStation 1 era games like Resident Evil. There are times where clicking or moving to a spot, the camera switch will confuse your character by moving in the opposite direction or giving up entirely. This was bothersome, however fairly rare. The game has one difficulty called New Game, which is the base experience. The game's difficulty comes down to how quickly you can learn the house layout, get context clues, and complete the not always so obvious puzzles. The more you progress in the game, the harder it will become. You're always racing against time before a creature is let loose who loves killing everyone in its path over and over again. With that being said, let's talk about the gameplay so you know what that means. In Homebody, you play as Emily, a girl battling her anxieties as she goes to meet old friends at a rental house to watch the Perseids. Once there, you get full character control. You can catch up on what everyone's been up to since you last saw them, or explore the house, visiting your room or gathering your surroundings. Eventually, the power will go out and a mysterious killer shows up picking people off one by one, including your helpless self. At this point, you'll find yourself trying to hide or running for your life, but no matter what you try, he will find you, and he will kill you. You'll then wake up back at the front of the house as the infinite time loop begins. You should by now notice the time at the top of your screen. You'll now have multiple hours to explore, talk, and solve puzzles to figure out what's going on in the house and how to free yourself from this infinite loop of death. As time goes on, you will progress or keep repeating the death loop. Either way, the monster will become stronger. It'll become less patient, coming at earlier times. It will remember your past, where you hide, and even start looking in places you've just discovered and are currently in. The way the monster progresses, not only in difficulty, but visually, was done amazingly. I never felt that going about your tasks was too difficult at first, but as you progress the game, it quickly becomes a more stressful situation. The puzzles form a huge portion of the game, while the other is story-related cutscenes or dialogue decisions. There are multiple types of puzzles, with some including locked doors, sound, and fluid volume manipulation. There is no inventory, so solving puzzles at most grants you the knowledge of how to solve some of them quicker for your future loops of death. You're able to visualize all the important pieces of knowledge you've collected in your memory log at any time. This feature is incredibly helpful, however sometimes confusing to remember where specific information is at when you need it. I would personally recommend having a pen and paper at hand if you prefer sketching out solutions. There is one puzzle in particular that requires knowledge of how to play the classic game of Minesweeper. That was a blast from the past I much enjoyed. One of the more frustrating puzzles for me was these question mark panels, or so we'll call them. This puzzle persists throughout the game and is used multiple times. I know I'm not the smartest, but even with the answer, it took me a while to understand it. One of the many unique parts about this game is there is little hand-holding. You'll have to figure out most puzzles for yourself, and some of them won't make much sense till later in the game. I would consider the puzzles to be fair. Some were a breeze in the park, while others were hard and took a lot more time to complete. I think it will come down to your personal experience with puzzle games, however if you have none, this is a great place to start. If you are ever stuck, during your death scenes, you'll have a dream of a friend that will act as a hint system. If you accept, he will help push you in the right direction. Sometimes, the right direction isn't so obvious. Perhaps you miss talking to a specific friend who worked in a field you're unfamiliar with. After a magical conversation, you're able to solve the puzzle you may have been stuck on. This forces you into caring about the story while being focused on the puzzles. I think they did an amazing job at splitting these apart. However, if you're someone who doesn't have much care for story or reading in a game, I'm going to let you know now, there is no voice acting and a lot of reading. Both perfectly fit the style, however you can skip the cutscenes if you so choose, though you'll miss out on a lot of context clues on what's going on or might be changing in the world around you. I am someone who likes both of these things, however I will get bored of reading if it's just too much or I deem the text uninteresting. I didn't feel this way with Homebody outside of one cutscene. They did an amazing job at having just enough text to understand what's going on, how characters act, what items do, and to portray the deep story they needed to. However, However, there's one cutscene in the entire game I felt like it just kept dragging on for far too long. It felt like a book rather than a game. I understood what they wanted to portray before it was done. It could have been a lot shorter or implemented a little differently. That was the only time in the entire game I was even a bit bored. I'm not going to show the cutscene, however, because if you're someone who enjoys the prolonged story details, it was perfect in that regard. I just simply do not. The entire world as we know it is simply a rented house with a lot of secrets and floors. The game is fairly closed off until you unlock extra portions of the house. Throughout the game, you'll eventually venture into a few locations strictly for story-related purposes, but they all feel just a tiny bit off. In a good way, of course. Homebody values exploration in the regard of knowing what is where in the house. Most rooms will have something to help point you in the right direction or provide a hint for a puzzle somewhere else. It may sound a little frustrating, but I heavily enjoyed the process of slowly progressing by exploring the house and getting familiar with where everything was. As for the audio, the entire atmosphere is spot on. There are very few soundtracks in the game, but a lot of ambience and sound effects. Almost all the audio you'll be hearing is something within the world moving. Just like real life, this could be the grandfather clock, your friends playing games, a pipe bursting, or the complete silence that will slowly drive you insane as it devours your mind, dwelling into the regret of not doing that one thing you told yourself to do yesterday and the days before that. Just do it right after this video, silly, come on now. The directional audio surprised me with how well it was done. Usually when multiple floors are in play, audio will be mixed together, making you question where certain sounds are coming from. However, Homebody made every little sound fit perfectly in its place. The only time I had an issue with audio is when the creature's footsteps were extremely loud and he was nowhere near. There were times he'd come out of hiding and just start his killing duties, thumping around like he was right behind me or in the same room, but he was just walking down a hallway, which I'm hearing 2 floors below. Could just be wearing steel-toe boots now that I think of it, but the audio seemed very inconsistent, so I think my game was just a little bugged. However, if it was an intended feature to psych you out, well played. A lot of games I've played tend to struggle with overlapping directional audio when they have multiple sources going on at any given time. I have to applaud Homebody as they did an amazing job in the entire audio department. Whatever room you're walking by, you will hear the properly corresponding activities going on inside it. Perhaps you'll hear the clock ticking, stairs creaking, or Megan playing Purd Mystery on the not Nintendo Entertainment System. I was honestly more immersed walking around in Homebody than my own house. Now let's talk about the story. The basics of the story goes as follows. You play a girl named Emily. You'll quickly learn she is constantly battling her inner depression anxiety demons. Brink of a panic attack, we pull over and call our best friend to thankfully calm us down. We then illegally drive to a creepy rental house in the middle of nowhere to watch the upcoming meteor shower and catch up with old friends. Once you step inside the house to a top-down shot of our luscious hair, the story and game have begun. You now control what happens next. However, you will most likely start by familiarizing yourself with the house and your friends, talking to each one to quickly learn who is who and how they feel about you. They'll mention the house rules, and you'll eventually find a book about it in the kitchen explaining them. Very simple, the cellar and attic are completely off limits. Why? House rules. Are we going to listen? Absolutely not. After some time of exploring, lightning will strike the house, knocking out the power entirely. A mysterious creature appears in its plague doctor-like mask and robes to start picking off all your friends one by one, and no matter what you do, eventually you. After your first death, you'll have a dream and then wake up in front of the house where you once started. At this point, you'll realize this is in fact an infinite time loop you're now stuck in. The story will continue to get deeper, sadder, and more complex the further you progress within the game. When the bulk of gameplay is focused around the multi-layered puzzles, this story and overall mystery can be hard to understand past face value if you're not paying attention. There is very little direction given to progress, and the story is up for interpretation. You can form your own conclusion about the psychological sides of the story. A lot of questions are not directly answered, leaving you to just assume or wonder why, which in my opinion is a great thing. You are constantly given slight clues on what may or may not be happening, but are never straight up told. Who is and isn't real? Who is the monster? Is it us? Why is every day a new struggle I must push through? Did we ever escape this time loop? What if Emily just has helophobia and is an introvert with trust and mental issues? Anyway, if you happen to get stuck at any point in time, get frustrated and let the monster murder you. You're better off because you'll dream of a guy named Pete who understands you. He will offer you hints to help push you in the right direction. This type of hint system was pretty unique, and while I got sick of seeing him because I'm not very intelligent, I only got stuck on a couple puzzles. One being these question mark puzzles, we'll call them. Pete also has his entire story attached to him, which was very unexpected to me. Like, who is Pete? Is he even a real friend? I don't know. But I'm going to trust all his little puzzle hints anyway? Absolutely. I can't think of another game I've played where death has its own progression and story attached to it. Now going back a little bit, within the first cutscene you're at a gas station. Wildly enough, getting gas. This cutscene is important and teaches you an important mechanic used throughout the entire game. However, the pump you're at has these weird lights on the back. No other station here does. Why? This is either a very clever Easter egg I could not for the life of me figure out within the house, or a missed opportunity for a hidden achievement. This is one of those things that bother me greatly and was never talked about or shown later. So if the devs are watching or someone knows, please let me know. This is a great time to move into the achievement section of the video. If you're new here, I will not review a game on this channel unless I have fully completed every single achievement the game has to offer. As I mentioned at the start of the video, there are a total of 10 achievements, all of which I managed to complete in 8.1 hours. Out of those 10, there are only 2 you may not get your first playthrough. The first being dead bodies. In one loop, inspect all of your friends' dead bodies on the cold hard floor. I managed to luckily get this one on the tutorial loop because I had no clue what I was doing and perfectly timed the creature around the house by accident. The second being called shock. Simply, die by touching the exposed wire in the attic. I did this after the game was completed, because when I walked by it the first time, I thought it was just a part of the scenery as no indicator popped up for me. Thank you devs for allowing me to go back and obtain this achievement without ever having to replay the game entirely. Not sure if this is a deeper message, however. As for the other 8 achievements, they are all tied to story progression and will be unlocked by just completing the game, so I won't spoil them all for you. This may be a reach, however the number 10 usually symbolizes completeness or perfection. The way Homebody is, as a game, makes me wonder if this was intentional for only having 10 achievements. If this is not the case, the game had a lot of opportunities to use its secrets and out-of-way interactions to be tied to some sort of achievement, so I'd be a little sad, but so be it. I obviously like collecting and complaining about achievements, so if or when you make the already requested sequel, please add a little more spice for us hunters. Yummy yummy, achievements in my tummy. I'm gonna be giving the hardest achievement award to dead bodies, simply for the fact I got lucky and I know I probably don't deserve it. It doesn't sound that hard, but depending when you try, the loop may not be in your favor. Now the positives of the game are as follows. Very easy to run, you shouldn't have any problems. The audio is quite surreal and can be spooky at times. It's a fairly unique take on the classic retro PS1 inspired survival horror games that even allow for multiple movement types including mouse. The puzzles are very well thought out and layered nicely on top of one another. There's also a lot more to this game than meets the eye or even this review. As for the negatives, there is no voice acting. This can be a huge positive for others. However, if I struggle staying focused, I'm sure others will too. There are a few longer cutscenes, and if you're not someone who enjoys reading, which is a big chunk of the game, this may be a turnoff for you. The story being fairly open to interpretation can make certain aspects of the game harder to grab from or relate to if you've not struggled with certain mental illnesses. The game is quite focused on puzzle solving, so if you're someone who isn't a fan of thinking outside of the box or playing escape room-like games, this might not be for you. And it could honestly just not be spooky enough for you. Homebody doesn't exactly do the over-the-top cheesy jump scares unless you're unlucky. Most of the horror comes from the atmosphere or psychological stress provided by each repeated day. In conclusion, I loved Homebody. I have a huge nostalgic fondness for point-and-click titles and retro gaming as a whole. I truly think they hit their mark. The game is very engaging and has a lot of thought-provoking moments. The majority of puzzles were satisfying to figure out. Having a horror game get progressively harder the more you progress in a unique way was also done perfectly. I loved all the small things that would constantly change within the house. My biggest issue with the entire game was just those few cutscenes that felt like they dragged just a little too long. I'm antsy and it's hard for me to sit and read one thing for too long. Personal skill issue truly. I think it's obvious. I heavily recommend exploring Homebody for yourself if you have a soft spot for retro horror or are looking for something a little out of the ordinary. The game is cheap but also fairly priced for how much fun it provides. If you're feeling a little grump, it also comes with a not so grump guarantee. Very worth picking up if you've questioned it, you got a puzzle itch, or see it on any type of sale. A quick off note for the grumps if they're listening. I've been watching fairly consistently since Kirby's return to Dreamland back when John was still involved. That will show my age a bit, however I love all you guys and gals over there. As for the devs of Homebody, you have all made a hidden gem I never thought I'd love as much as I did. Keep doing what you are doing and I'm very excited for any future titles you all work on. That will however conclude my Homebody review. Thank you for watching. This is my second ever review. I'm still trying to perfect my craft, so let me know what you thought down below, or what game you'd like me to perfect next. I'll be trying to push more of these videos out when I can, so make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss a video, and most importantly, till next time, take care.